receiving calls. Yeah, very good. सर आपके वेलकम रिमार्क्स आपके व्हाट्सएप पे ही हैं सर। सर अभी जो 3:15 पे वेलकम रिमार्क्स आपको सर अमिताभ जी, कैन यू हियर मी?
Yes, sir.
Is it really going to make any difference if I put the background screen?
Sir, देख लेता हूँ।
I think now it is better, huh?
या आप बैकग्राउंड स्क्रीन लगाइए क्योंकि अब लाइट थोड़ी सही है।
वो कह रहे हैं अमिताभ जी कह रहे हैं आप लगा लो बैकग्राउंड स्क्रीन। चलो
No, sir, please remove that. It's better now.
ये तो 43 में ओके देखते हैं। कौन सी एक्सक्लूसिव लिंक है वही दिखेंगे शायद। ये लाइट चलाओ तो देखें क्या फर्क पड़ता है। देखें जरा जरा ऑन करो। ये नाउ इट्स गोइंग टू इंडिया। अभी ये भी हटा सकते हैं क्या? हाँ संजय जी, मिस्टर सेगल साहब ना अभी कार से ज्वाइन करेंगे. ही इज ऑन द वे टू शाहजहानपुर and he'll be joining from his mobile. Huh? I will share the link. So he'll be joining. Just connect with him. Huh? Yes. कल क्या? अरे आइए. हाँ क्या करना है बताओ. क्या करना है बताओ.
हाँ हमारे पास शेड्यूल है. साउंड ठीक आ रही है. अब हमने मोबाइल डिस्कनेक्ट कर दिया, लेकिन आप म्यूट पर हैं, आप नहीं बोल पाएंगे. अच्छा समझ गए.
नहीं सर, आवाज सही आ रही है.
ठीक है. तो
वॉइस एज वेल एज योर वीडियो इज फाइन.
I will then log out because our panel is little later.
Sir, you may switch off your camera and your mic and don't log out from the webinar.
Okay.
Whenever your session is, just put them on. Okay, sir.
Understood. Thank you.
वहाँ पे कुछ यहाँ पे भी आप कर दिया।
Sir, it's 3:15. Can we start now?
What's up? Can you? Sir, what do you suggest? Let me call Mr. Sehgal ना, क्या उनको देख लो पहले लॉगिन कराऊं उसके बाद
वो लॉगिन कर लें, वो लॉगिन विल स्टार्ट।
I'll just request him.
Now we'll start at 3:30.
वो वही जैसे 11 बजे होते पहुंचते थे, 12:30 निकल लेते लंच के लिए, फिर 4 बजे आते थे, फिर 5 में निकल लेते थे। नहीं, वो कह रहे थे जब और सुबह से 11 बजे से अभिषेक बैठा था उनके साथ। थोड़ा जल्दी रख लेते थे और
जी Mathur sir just had a word with president. He is just joining. जी Mathur sir, Mr. Our president has also joined. We can start now. Mathur साहब आप अनम्यूट कर ले अपने आप को जी. I'll request you to unmute yourself, Mathur sir. Mathur साहब unmute कर लीजिए अपने आप को. Kindly unmute yourself. I'll request you to kindly unmute yourself, Mathur साहब. Can you hear me?
Mathur sir, you are on mute. Yeah, it's okay now.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, it's fine. Now it is fine now.
Okay.
Please carry on. Please carry on.
Rajiv, please tell Amitabh to WhatsApp to the link to Dr. Arvind Mohan.
Okay.
Has the president joined?
Yeah, he has already joined, sir.
Okay.
He has already joined.
So we are starting the proceedings now. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm A.K. Mathur from Lucknow Management Association. Welcome to this annual convention of LMA on governance imperatives of economic transformation of Uttar Pradesh. To briefly introduce Lucknow Management Association, I will run a short video prepared by our Young Managers Forum. Amitabh, would you run the video, please?
Lucknow Management Association, a local chapter of IMA, has led the management movement as a torchbearer since its formation in 1976. LMA has been a home to distinguished change makers eager to execute the mission of acting as an accelerator to aid individuals and institutions towards actualizing their potential. The eminence of members of LMA adds value to their encouragement for working and future managers in the endeavor of facilitating their participation and involvement in the proliferation of principles and practices of management. LMA Annual Convention, LMA Global Thought Leadership Series, and plethora of effective events organized round the year elevates the learning quotient of everyone involved. Young Managers Forum presently engages in developing a management culture by adopting newer management principles to help individuals and institutions achieve exponential growth. The newly formed Women Wing is a ray of hope which reflects the belief on which LMA stands strong. Build the dreams, repeat the dreams, and the dreams build you up.
To add a few words, I would say LMA is a Category 1 affiliate of All India Management Association, which is the apex management body of the country. We have a multidisciplinary members of over 2,000 professionals and around 100 institutional members. We organize a variety of management development programs and high impact interactions on vital public policy issues, including a theme-based annual convention. LMA is a vibrant body which has been rated as the best management association 8 times in IMA's annual Pan-India evaluation. Dr. Navneet Sehgal, Additional Chief Secretary, MSME, Export Promotion and Information, Government of Uttar Pradesh, is the current president of LMA. He is one of the most effective and influential bureaucrats and needs really no introduction to this audience. He has held a large number of key positions during his illustrious tenure in the state government. We also have Professor Kavita Pathak, Director, Jaipuria Institute of Management. Jaipuria is one of the premier business schools with 4 campuses in the country. Dr. Kavita Pathak, with her dynamic leadership, has taken Jaipuria campus to new heights. The institute was LMA's academic partner in last year's convention and is also a partner in this convention. I will now invite Dr. Navneet Sehgal to say a few words of welcome. Dr. Navneet Sehgal, sir.
Thank you, Madhur Saab. And Ms. Kavita Pathak ji, Rajiv Pradhan ji, and my other colleagues from LMA. I myself, on my personal behalf, I welcome all the delegates to this annual convention of Lucknow Management Association. You see, Corona pandemic has pushed us to, mostly on virtual modes. So this is one of the, both ways, I would say, advantage, disadvantage of a pandemic. But we have to kind of play our role. Lucknow Management Association has been over the years making stellar contributions in awakening management techniques, spreading good management techniques among all the managers, whether in government or in private sector. And today's subject for governance in transformation of government is a very relevant subject. The current government has been working to improve the governance to bring about transformation. So the principle is reform, perform, and transform. So transformation cannot be brought about without effective governance. And governance tools are very important to bring about these changes. And first, to understand these governance tools, bringing technology, using technology to bring the citizen government interface more effective, citizen business interface, citizen industry interface, government industry interface. So there are plenty of services that the government can, with the use of technologies, use of management techniques, can improve to deliver better services. So today's convention has a very important role to play, and I welcome all the delegates to it, and I hope that the contributions would be effectively used by the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sehgal. Now we go on to the next item. We have been publishing a convention journal containing useful material on the theme and sub-themes of the convention. This year's journal has been edited by Professor Anubhav Mishra and Smita Pandey of Jaipuria Institute of Management. I would request Dr. Navneet Sehgal and Dr. Kavita Pathak to formally release the journal virtually. This is the cover page. And these are the contents. And that's all. This is the editorial. Thank you very much. I would request Dr. Anubhav Mishra, the chief editor of the journal, to say a few words about this document.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I must say this is one of the most recent approach where we see even the government data is showing that UP is improving on multiple parameters, whether it is economy, GDP, or the various industries. So the convention thing is pretty apt and relevant. In our journal, what we have tried is to have a combination of research articles from academia as well as latest news articles in the form of opinion pieces. So we have covered articles on sustainability, rural areas, policy, governance, even air pollution, to give an overall outlook of how we expect that this state is going to outperform other states. So I thank you, LMA, for giving me the opportunity. So it was a very enriching learning experience to learn more about UP from a policy and governance point of view. So thank you. This journal is available in the soft copy. If anyone needs a hard copy, they can contact us and we'll be providing the copy. So thank you.
Thank you, Anubhav. As Anubhav said, that anyone interested in receiving a soft copy of the journal may request Lucknow Management Association, and we'll be happy to mail you a copy. I would now request Professor Kavita Pathak to say a few words. Dr. Pathak.
President LMA, Dr. Navneet Sehgal, Mathurji, Dr. Pradhan, and the eminent panelists. First up, I'd like to compliment and congratulate the LMA team for this annual convention. And I think picking up a very topical theme for the convention in the wake of government initiatives and the growth that we see reflected in these states' initiatives. Having looked at this state, and we are resident of this state for a long time now, as a state that if you were to look up a list of examination results, people would start looking up at the bottom instead of on top when the name of Uttar Pradesh used to come at a point in time. Policy imperatives, a lot of governance interventions have probably made it possible that this state has, I think, occupied in terms of gross state GDP, the second largest, it has emerged as the second largest economy. And this, I think, is the Niti Aayog report, surpassing Gujarat, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. Something must be going right. Something must be done appropriately. And so the governance imperative for economic transformation are probably, the instruments are already in place. The direction is already set, and the growth that we will see unfolding in the years to come with the right intent of governance probably will multiply these outcomes. And to understand Uttar Pradesh in one sentence is one of the, I am a professor of marketing, and from that standpoint, it reflects 8% of cumulative purchasing power of our country. And it reflects one of the single, if it had to be a standalone economy, it will be one of the largest standalone economies in the world. Now, given this background, the kind of development that we have seen, and yet another factor that's adding a lot of layer to this entire, to the state is our enormous human capital, which also is nowadays called as demographic dividend. And on this backdrop, we probably have a foundation where if the governance mechanisms are stronger, made more robust, we just heard the president say that technology is emerging as a very strong intervening influence in creating trust between stakeholder communities. I'll just unpack for a moment the construct of governance, and if we were to look at what is defined as governance, I'm reading it out as I find it in literature. It says the manner in which power is exercised in the management of countries' economic and social resources. And Asian Development Bank says that there are 4 key pillars of governance, good governance. So there is participation, there is predictability, there's transparency, and there's accountability. In any country, in any state, it is of utmost importance that the policy direction once set is stable for at least short to medium term, if not long term. It is also imperative in good governance that the long-term goals are not compromised for short-term gains. It is equally imperative that the key stakeholder voices are factored in a participatory manner. So when we say good governance for economic transformation, we are on the path. But I would also quote simultaneously to India-wide data, which is something which we need to look at. The Transparency International rating of our country, and this is not a state statistics, shows that we are slipping on our corruption perception. But in the same breath, the political risk indices of our country indicates that our political climate has become more stable over a period of time, which is obviously reflected in full majority government at the top. A stable policy environment is the first prerequisite of good governance for any policy reforms to roll. That's very well understood. Participatory mechanisms of policy formulation and implementation is again doable, possible, and this is, I think, a very strong agenda at any level to enforce. And thirdly, using the bridge of technology, eliminating the manual influences at as many touch points as possible will probably restore the trust of all stakeholders, whether these are communities, these are pradhans, these are business owners, or these are householders. That is going to reinforce the trust into the governance mechanisms. How to leverage, where to find choking points, and how to unleash them for effective flow of governance. I think those are the kind of agenda points that I see that will be taken up in discussions in the future. As of now, as a proud citizen of the state, I can see that the state is making the strides necessary for the economy to probably grow further in the future. On that note, I end what I had to say. Thank you very much. Mathur sir, you're on mute, sir.
Mathur sir, your mic is on mute.
Thank you, Dr. Pathak. We'll now start the first session on governance for world-class industries and infrastructure. This session will be chaired by Mr. Kiran Chopra. I have great pleasure in introducing Mr. Kiran Chopra and the 3 speakers in this session. I am reading out their brief introduction to save time. Please see the more detailed introduction in the resume, which has already been circulated. Session Chair, Mr. Chopra, is a qualified rubber technologist from the National College of Rubber Technology, London, and a graduate of London Metropolitan University and the Plastic and Rubber Institute of the UK. He is chairman and managing director of an Indo-German joint venture called Chopra Retech Rubber Products Limited, which is a manufacturer of niche automotive parts and which are exported to every continent in the world, including the world's largest automotive market by sales, China. The company has today the largest range of such parts in the world and has in its client list marquee brands like Aston Martin UK, to whom they supply exhaust hangers exclusively. Mr. Kiran Chopra has brought the company on a global platform as market leader. He has also nominated to the Prime Minister's Task Force panel for MSMEs. Mr. Chopra was chairman of CII UP Council 2004 to 2005. He is presently a member of National and Northern Region Council of CII, besides UP State Council. Our first speaker is Dr. Ajay Mathur. Has he joined, Rajiv?
Sir, he just on the way. He'll be joining within 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay.
So as Mr. Sachin Agarwal also.
So let me introduce him while he's on the way. Mathur heads the International Solar Alliance, leads its operations, and as Director General carries out the functions of the ISA Secretariat and is responsible to the ISA Assembly comprising 98 countries. Prior to joining ISA, Dr. Mathur was Director General of the Energy and Resource Institute, TERI, where he spearheaded the move to accelerate action towards a low carbon and cleaner economy through promotion and adoption of renewable energy and green hydrogen in the Indian electricity sector. He also anchored the annual World Sustainable Development Summits during his tenure at TERI. Dr. Ajay Mathur was also member of India's Prime Minister Council on Climate Change and co-chair of the Global Energy Transitions Commission and of Cleaning Cooling Initiatives of the One Planet Summit. Dr. Mathur received his bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the then University of Roorkee and master's and PhD degrees from the University of Illinois. He has also received the Distinguished Alumnus Award from both his alma maters. Dr. Mathur was appointed as Chevalier d'Ordre National de Merit, which is Knight of the National Order of Merit by the President of France in recognition of his outstanding commitment to the preservation of environment and coping with energy-related challenges. Dr. Mathur was member of Prime Minister's delegation to recent Glasgow Summit on climate change and has represented India and ISA in several international negotiations. Our second speaker of the session is Mr. S.P. Shukla, a member of the Group Executive of Mahindra Board, and as Group President, he is responsible for the defense, agro, agri, and steel sectors. In this position, he is also chairman of board of several companies engaged in designing and producing a diverse range of products including armored vehicles, radars, naval systems, aerostructures, micro-irrigation equipment, and special alloy steels. After studying at IIT BHU and IIM Ahmedabad, he has gained 40 years of rich and varied experience in managing large projects and operations. He is considered to be a top professional in the field of defense and aerospace, automotive tires, and information and communication technology sectors in India. He has often been invited to speak at several prestigious international institutions, such as Harvard Business School, Nelson Mandela University, Washington University, Sydney Business School, TEDx, Young Changemaker Conclave organized by the UN. He has also delivered sessions on varied topics at the reputed academic institutions in India, such as IITs and IIMs. I may also share with you that Mr. Shukla was one of the awardees of the Pride of Uttar Pradesh Award by Lucknow Management Association 2 years back. He will speak on the ideas for accelerated development of UP in the current decade. Our third speaker in the session will be Mr. Sachin Agarwal, Chairman and Managing Director, PTC Industries. Has Sachin joined, Rajiv?
Yeah, Mr. Sachin has already joined, sir.
Mr. Sachin Agarwal has done his Master in Business Administration from the University of Tulsa, USA, and MSc in Finance from Boston College, Massachusetts. He also co-founded eSoft Technologies Limited, a software company with offices in Lucknow, Mumbai, and New York. Under his leadership, PTC has grown at an extraordinary pace. He has worked extensively on development of new technologies and metallurgies for production of components required for various supercritical applications like aerospace, oil and gas, energy, power, and marine. His interventions led to a number of new initiatives in the company, including acquisition of several state-of-the-art technologies and the setting up of a capability to manufacture metal components at par with the best in the world. Now, these were the three speakers, and with this, I hand over the session to Mr. Kiran Chopra, the session chairman. Over to you, Mr. Kiran Chopra. Mr. Chopra.
Yes, thank you, Mathurji. A very good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this first session on governance for world-class industries and infrastructure. We have a very illustrious panel comprising of Dr. Ajay Mathur, Mr. S.P. Shukla, and Mr. Sachin Agarwal, who have just been introduced by Mr. A.K. Mathur. So those of you who joined in later can have a look at that in the brochure that has been sent to all of us. To set the context quickly, the subject evokes various aspects to governance for industries and infrastructure. Number one, of course, is the physical infrastructure where we still lag behind, where the touch and feel of world-class is somehow missing. Yes, many of the factories we enter are truly world-class in contrast. So it's akin to like driving a rickety Ambassador with a 4-liter Rolls-Royce engine, and that's the kind of situation we have to get out of. Industrial parks and estates need to up the ante and create facilities and infrastructure to blend with world-class manufacturing standards that are followed inside the industries set up there. So there has to be some universalization of standards across the country, be it green infrastructure or the other components in the mix. The transformation has to be inside out, of course. The second is the integration of technology in all aspects of creating this infrastructure and making it affordable for the MSME sector in particular. This is very crucial for all our industries to graduate to Industry 4.0 requirements. So all of these can be an outcome of a cohesive approach and policy creation by all the stakeholders. And this being a very dynamic process in a fast-changing world, periodic updates and upgrades will be imperative. And finally, what goes on within? From my perspective, the key elements of a successful manufacturing business could well be a combination of a product that is futuristic and globally scalable across multiple applications, and of course, sustainable. A management that is agile and nimble and has the ability to course correct or pivot by preempting future needs of the market. Of course, a team that works like a well-oiled machine very cohesively, access to competitively priced and easily sourced raw materials, indigenously preferably. A large part of the operations must and will incorporate AI, robotics, IoT, machine learning, AR, 3D printing, etc. All of these are part of manufacturing processes today. And manufacturing cost frugality, that is very crucial. And the ability to be the most competitively priced is what will differentiate one industry from another. And finally, research and development must be a very integral part and crucial part of all businesses. So this is my take on, the perspective I have of future ready industries. So to broaden all this and throw in some very pertinent and valuable inputs, I will now request Mr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance, who will share, I believe, a presentation on the theme, Policy, Business Models, and Technology Developments, the Holy Trinity of Governance. So I would like to mention here that after we have heard our three panelists over roughly 45 minutes, time permitting, we will take a few questions in the Q&A towards the end. Please do type in your questions for the viewers, that is, and make sure you mention the name of the panelist the question is addressed to. So thank you, Dr. Mathur. You may kindly take over.
Has Dr. Mathur joined, Rajiv?
Sir, I think we can start with Mr. S.P. Shukla, Mr. Sachin.
Yeah, he's coming.
Yeah, he's joining within few minutes.
Okay, so then we will request Mr. Shukla if he would like to take the place of Mr. Mathur for now.
Fine.
Definitely. Good afternoon, Chopra sir.
Good afternoon.
Is my presentation on now?
Yes, we can see that. Yeah.
So good afternoon, all the dignitaries. First and foremost, thank you to Saigal Sahab and Mathur Sahab for inviting me. And for all the kind words Mathur Sahab said about me, I'm grateful. Thank you, Chopra Sahab, for giving the introduction to today's session. Next, please. Before I start on the presentation itself, let me say a few words about my close connection with UP. Though I'm based in Mumbai for decades, having been working in corporate sector, I belong to UP and heart does belong to UP. I did my engineering right here at IIT BHU. And as Mathur Sahab said, I was honored with Uttar Pradesh Gaurav Award. I have also worked in UP in the early part of my career at Lucknow and Varanasi for short stints. Therefore, what I speak about UP is not theoretical, it is practical. Till COVID came, I was spending 30 to 45 days outside India in connection with joint ventures and different projects. So what I saw outside India, what I saw in Bombay and other cities, and what I know about my own state, UP, I have tried to bring it together to share what I'm saying now. Next, please. I do believe that today we are at the cusp of a very promising future. Next, please. I have never seen, next, please, have we changed? Infra push. I think slide has not changed. Has the slide changed, please?
Yes, sir, it has changed. We can see the infra push.
Okay, thank you. Never before, and now I'm more than 60 years old and I come to UP regularly, never before I have seen such a push on infrastructure development in our state. It is a fourth largest state, but in very near future, UP will have the largest network of expressways in India. Today, India has 2,000 kilometers of expressways, and out of which 1,000 kilometers is already completed in UP. And we will be adding more than that in next 3 years. Same is true for highways, and same is true for largest railway network being in UP. UP also has largest number of metro cities. Cities defined as population of more than 10 lakh. And no wonder, highest number of smart cities are planned in UP. When we talk about India having a target, UP is the state which is contributing largest number of those smart cities. Next, please. Then we look at the economic segments. We talked about area. Now we are talking about economics of it, GDP. As it was stated earlier by Dr. Pathak, in last 1 year, UP has very proudly overtaken Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Gujarat to become number 2 state in terms of GDP. Agriculture sector is thriving. In food grain, UP produces the largest tonnage, 20% of India. It is not Punjab, it's not Haryana, it is UP. Similarly, sugar bowl of India is rightly UP. You can make out, no state makes more sweets than UP. When I come to UP, I do proper justice to sweets. Largest milk producer and second largest vegetable producer. In everything, UP is in top 2 in India, either 1 or 2. When we look at MSMEs, largest number of small scale units, and they employ 1 crore people in the state. UP also has a thriving services sector. Not many people realize, and therefore I am saying that UP is among the leading exporters of electronics, software, and IT services. State has a very flourishing tourism and hospitality sector also. Today, UP is number 3 in tourist arrivals in India. Actually, when Uttarakhand was part of it, UP was the largest. And I do believe this is one sector where a lot can be done, and we will be talking about it later. Other than infrastructure, the project which has invited maximum interest and publicity among the target audience is defense corridor. UP, before we say defense corridor, let us spend 1 minute on why do we need facilities like a defense corridor. If you see industries develop in a cluster, standalone industries find it difficult to source material and sell the output. That is why you see in UP, Bhadohi became the center for carpets, Varanasi had sarees, Muradabad had brassware. When many manufacturers in a similar kind of industry are located, they find it easier to source their materials. They find it easier to source their manpower. They also can sell to one another, learn from one another, and sometimes they also make marketing alliances to sell their products. Simply put, good old concept where cities used to be famous, Varanasi for sarees or Muradabad for brass goods, or Agra for a lot of work done on marble, Sangmarmar. Defense corridor is on the same idea. You have large system integrators who make large defense platforms. And then there are hundreds of component suppliers, ancillary industries, service providers. They will be in small and medium scale, and they will be interfacing with the large companies. This provides a favorable environment for innovation while supporting excellence because of the competition among the units. If you have a large unit and there is only one medium scale unit nearby, generally it will be one-to-one relationship. But if there are several units nearby and they offer to make the same component, quality improves, prices become competitive. That makes it possible for large company, which is integrating a platform, to be able to produce more competitively, a better product, and also sell more. This is a win-win for large, medium, and small. This is the concept behind defense corridor, and I do salute both UP government as well as Ministry of Defense, central government, who thought of corridor concept to kickstart India on the route to make in India in defense. Next, please. Just a few words. I represent Mahindra Group. We have a large presence in UP. We employ more than 18,000 people in different companies of the group in UP. We are among the largest taxpayers. I had asked for a quick number. It is more than 700 crores a year. We have 4 lakh customers of the group here. We have 2 large units, auto recycling plant as well as Peckham Center. We had actually 2 manufacturing units at Rishikesh, at Haridwar and at Rudrapur, but they have gone to Uttarakhand. We have done significant CSR work in the state. As you can see, oxygen plant, ambulances, oxygen concentrators, medical camps, and literally lakhs of trees planted. Why I say this? We have been deeply engaged in the state. We have very high involvement in the state, and therefore we will make our suggestions. We will share our ideas with all seriousness after considerable thought has been applied. Next, please. UP has also taken lead in using technology in governance. I'm sure everybody has seen UP 112, utilized it at some time, or they know somebody who has utilized it. at the very least, you have seen 112 vehicles running on the roads to go and help someone. UP is the pioneer in this exercise. UP government and UP police deserve compliments for having been the first state in India to come up with emergency center like this, and other states are now following. At this personal note, Mahindra Defence has been proud partner of UP government and UP police, and we thank for the opportunity to serve the state by providing IT and infra support for this program. So our engagement with UP is strong and ongoing. Next, please. That brings me to the second half of my presentation. Few ideas for accelerated growth. Next, please. Let us take one by one. Let us begin with services. Today, when we say services sector, it is currently largely concentrated in Noida and Ghaziabad. They have become the IT hubs. They have close proximity to Delhi, and that has helped. But let us remember that UP has 7 metros, the highest number in the country for any state. We can actually make concerted efforts that IT services footprint is developed now in these 7 metros. It does not remain concentrated only in Noida and Ghaziabad. We should also look to expand services sector beyond IT. IT is definitely a wonderful beginning, and UP is among the top 3 IT exporters in the country. Please do not underestimate UP. UP competes very favorably with IT centers in the south. But we can go beyond IT. We already have centers of handicrafts production. What we need is market them better so that more can be sold at a better price, and that will improve the incomes of handicraft workers. Similarly, availability of skilled manpower which already exists can facilitate furniture industry. We know that there are pockets of furniture making in UP already, particularly in Saharanpur and that belt. But there are many small units. What we need to do is, since we have the manpower, develop furniture industry at few centers in UP. It can be a large generator of employment. And of course, last but not the least, being the food basket of India, food processing has tremendous scope. Some steps have already been taken in that direction, but we have not yet realized our full potential in food processing in UP. All the 3 sectors which I have mentioned just now, they will help create jobs both in urban areas and rural areas. So while IT may be largely in urban areas, and I mentioned 7 metros, rural areas will benefit from other 3: handicrafts, furniture, and food processing. Next, please. Now we come to expanding manufacturing footprint. Defense corridor is a wonderful step. It will definitely trigger a spurt in manufacturing the way it happened long time back in British India, when Kanpur used to be a leading center of industry in the country. Even today, Kanpur has considerable defense industry presence, but corridor will only grow. But let us develop other ideas. There are huge land banks today available for the industry. We can develop industrial clusters, especially near the 2 IITs. near IIT Kanpur, we have 2 metros, Lucknow and Kanpur. And near IIT Varanasi, we have Prayagraj and Varanasi. Availability of skilled manpower is one of the major factors when somebody thinks of putting up a plant or a factory. Industrial clusters built near the 2 IITs will definitely receive considerable interest. High quality technical manpower is increasingly becoming scarce. Competition is high. And if students of these IITs are assured of a job nearby, they will favorably consider the industrial clusters. UP has become a power surplus state. Power tariffs are also rational, compliments to the government. Now the time is that uninterrupted power availability is to be leveraged, is to be promoted, that this is a big positive factor for our industries. Last but not the least, the state ranks today second on ease of doing business. Can you believe it? Few years back, people used to say it's very difficult to get anything done in UP. That is history. With ease of doing business having improved so much, we need to leverage it. We need to talk more about it. Only then message goes all across that so much is being said about ease of doing business in UP. Let us see what is the change which has happened in few years recently. Then we come to tourism footprint. I'm not saying anything new. Everyone knows highest multiplier effect on GDP growth comes from tourism and hospitality sector. If a tourist spends 1,000 rupees on tourism, that goes largely into the pockets of the citizens of that city and state. If somebody spends 1,000 rupees on something else, it is not necessary that that money stays in the state, because if it might have been manufactured elsewhere, taxes might have been paid somewhere else. So the state GDP will benefit by a small percentage of that value of the goods which has been consumed in that state. But when it comes to tourism, hospitality, whatever you pay for the room, whatever you pay for the transport, whatever you pay for the food, everything remains in the state. That is why it is considered high multiplier for GDP growth. Today, second largest number of domestic tourists and third largest number of foreign tourists visit UP. A wonderful step has been taken by government to upgrade infrastructure and other facilities. Kashi corridor will be a great magnet for domestic tourists and also some extent foreign tourists. So many new airports are coming up in UP. What is needed? We need to talk to airlines. We need to convince them to start direct flights to UP, to these airports. If you have to route a flight or travel via Delhi, it does increase the travel time, and sometimes you think about it, change your plans or postpone the plan. A direct flight coming to Agra, coming to Varanasi will have so much difference. So if I have to go to Varanasi today from Bombay, there are limited number of flights. To Delhi, every 1 hour there are 2 flights. We need to talk to airlines to increase the number of flights. In the beginning, they might say my occupancy is low, but It is only a matter of time when people realize you can fly directly to these states from different parts of the country. Tourist arrivals will grow. Success builds upon success. More tourists come and you start getting more flights. That brings me to tackling manpower related challenges. India's 1/6 population is in UP. World's 1/6 population is in India, and India's 1/6 is in UP. Of that 1/6, 60% are in working age group. We need to take advantage of this demographic dividend. Industrial and service sector both can benefit from this huge availability of manpower, which today is going to other states looking for opportunities. In industrial sector, we need manpower both at managerial and operational level. So we don't have to worry about managerial level. With 2 IITs and 1 IIM in the state, managerial and engineering talent is readily and locally available. But a plant industry also needs large number of technicians who need not be IIT or NIT graduates. This is where collaboration with ITIs will be needed so that people have the necessary skill to work in the new age industries which will come to UP. Our old industries, which did very well in India, were initially textile and sugar. Leather was other big industry. Now time has come that for new age industries, we have trained technicians with the skills who can operate in those industries. If you are in defense corridor, you will need people who have skills useful for the defense industry. Services sector similarly will need people who have been trained, who have the skill to manage hotels, travel agencies, and tourist guide. We have many people, but a certain luster, a certain sheen needs to be provided. A modern age marketing needs to be given so that our people can actually take over the local industry and management and will not come back. We will not need to get people from different metros from elsewhere. We will not have to get them. Next, please. That brings me to the summary of my today's presentation. We talked about what are the opportunities available, and in very brief, we talked about what ideas can be used in services, in manufacturing, and in tourism sector. If some of these ideas get used, it will be my pleasure, joy, and pride. I'll be very happy to work with LMA to further fill out the ideas with strong focus on governance, timely completion of projects, and these 3 pillars, industry, services, and tourism. I have no doubt state of UP is poised for accelerated growth in the current decade. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shukla. Am I audible?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for a very holistic insight to the possibilities that exist in UP, and definitely we are surging ahead at a frenetic pace, and I'm sure the future bodes well for the state as well as for industry and the development of industry, especially the defense corridor. I'll summarize at the end, of course, the points you touched upon, but for now, I will now request. We missed Mr. Mathur earlier, and I would request Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance, who will share a presentation, as I mentioned earlier, titled Policy, Business Models, and Technology Developments. The So, Dr. Mathur, would you like to take over, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chaudhary. I will first apologize for being late. And I was coming back to my hotel at this traffic problems and so on. But that being said, I apologize for not being in time. But more than anything else, I'm delighted to be here at this LMA function. Lucknow and the LMA are close to my heart, and I'm delighted at this opportunity to share my thoughts on how we can move ahead. As you rightly said, what I'd like to do is to discuss what I call the holy trinity of good governance, which includes policies, which includes business models, and which includes technology developments. And whether you look at defense, or as I will look at the energy sector, particularly the renewable energy sector, I see these as being the three triads on which economic development is based. And I would venture to suggest that specific interventions in these areas would help the greater and the faster growth of our home state of UP. Let me share a few slides. What I thought was that it might be useful in terms of ensuring that we, it says you're sharing your screen, but I can't see it. I hope you can.
Yeah, we can see to it, sir. Yeah, your laptop.
My laptop.
Yeah, we can see a laptop, but not the real, the PPT or.
Okay. So let me stop share and do it again.
Yeah, please, please.
If not, I will just continue. I think that's better now. Let me now make
now it is there. Now it is there, sir. Now it is there.
Okay.
Please carry on, sir. It is fine, sir. It is there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As I said, what I'll do is I'll use these slides more by way of reinforcing the kinds of messages that I want to leave with you. I believe that it is important not just to attract financial investments, but also investments in the form of talents, partnerships, and build up stakeholder, which means everybody, the vendors, the people who will be the buyers, their confidence. Now, in doing so, obviously, the key is to minimize overheads and optimize resource use. This I'm coming back from the inauguration of a mini grid, and I will venture to say, and as I will say this in subsequent things, one of the reasons why we have a lot of mini grids in UP is because of the fact that there is a clear mini grid policy in place. The third point that I want to say is it is important to remain relevant. Now, all of these may seem as things that make strong sense. Of course they do. But let me work from the other side, which is why do things fail? And I would therefore like to suggest that in case we do not have policy or the promotion of technological development or business models, that's when initiatives fail. I would like to start with policy. Now, one of the reasons that we have a lot of mini grids in UP is because as way back as 2016, 5 years ago, a mini grid policy was laid out, laying out the framework for this. Now, as a result of this, many areas which today are connected by the grid, but where reliable electricity is not there, mini grids are providing us that energy. This is important because what it does is it allows a contract between the producer of the energy and the users of that energy, whether it be a telecom tower or it be the local gas agency or houses that want light at night so that children can study. All of these people can get access to electricity. And this is at prices which the supplier can bear and which the consumers can afford to pay. This kind of a policy has brought in foreign investment. And in this particular company that I was with earlier today, we saw that a Japanese company had invested, they had in fact now 41% of the shareholding in this company, and are now looking at pan-India markets and outside of India markets for energy supply as well. I will argue that as we move ahead, we will need in UP to have a policy regarding what we do with solar electricity.
Hello,
There's somebody who's speaking on the phone.
I'm sorry for this. I would request everybody on
timing fix
mute their.
Amitabh ji, please mute everyone except the speaker. Please, sir, carry on. Please, sir, carry on.
Thank you. So the key issue is that their investors have been spooked by the Andhra decision not to pay prices for renewables which were found in earlier auctions, because in each auction the price has been declining. It has been declining to the point where today solar electricity costs 1.99 rupees per kilowatt hour, far less than any other source, but only when the sun is shining. And what Andhra says is, listen, I need to use the coal power purchase agreements that I have because at night I need them. So a degree of certainty about what will be bought and how much will be bought is needed, and consequently a policy like the mini grid policy would help in pulling in investments into the solar energy area. We at the Solar Alliance are working on creating case studies of the best models across the world, and the UP mini grid policy model is in fact one of those, through which we seek to pull money in and enable the generation of electricity from solar across the world, whether it is through mini grids or through solar parks or through rooftop systems. We do see that the presence of a policy helps in creating the kind of confidence that is needed by the developer, by investors, and most importantly by buyers, because they are also investing in buying a particular service, in this particular case solar energy services, from a otherwise unknown startup. And by this policy, you create the confidence that we will go ahead. So in my view, without certain policies, this will not be possible. And at the Solar Alliance, we look forward to creating these kinds of examples and to circulate them in the world. The second point that I think is important is business models. This is something that is often overseen. People overlook them. Why do we overlook them? Because it seems that this is something that is going to happen anyway. But when you are looking at regulated businesses, for example, whether we look at the solar energy area or any other area, these are regulated businesses. These are businesses where we need the UP Electricity Regulatory Commission, or in the case of interstate agencies, the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, to have a set of rules. So the first point, as I said, was the creation of policy. But what is the policy about? The policy is about enabling particular kinds of business models to occur. So we saw, for example, in UP that when the Electricity Act of 2003 was passed, under that the UP regulator brought out rules for structured feed-in tariff mechanisms for the supply of renewable electricity. And that has led to a large amount of renewable energy generating capacity being set up in the state. The model that it did was, therefore, there were private sector players who set up facilities and knew that they would receive a certain tariff if they were able to provide it. Now, that has been overtaken by this new policy of auctions, where the price is determined by the lowest bidder and not by a standard tariff. But this is how it has evolved. A very different model is what is used, for example, in Agra and Greater Noida, where franchisees have been given the task of providing electricity in these areas. These franchisees are private sector agencies, and they buy electricity from the state transmission company and sell it to consumers at the same prices at which they are sold in the rest of the state. So as far as the consumer is concerned, in terms of money, there is no difference. He pays the same amount. But the difference that has occurred, for example, in Agra, is that before the franchisee system started, Agra was getting an average of 16 hours something of electricity a day. Today, they're getting 23 hours, 45 minutes of electricity a day. So it's near 100% time that they get electricity. Now, how has this been done? They're buying the same amount of electricity, they're charging the same amount of money because the losses in the systems have been decreased. How did they decrease it? By investing. This is private sector which brought in money, invested in new conductors, invested in new transformers, invested in new distribution lines, etc. As a result, losses in the system have dramatically declined. Yes, the private sector company which has the franchise of Agra put in a lot more money than was originally envisaged, but that's a private sector issue. They still make money from the efficiencies that they've brought into the system. But the point that I want to make is that the policy enabled this kind of business model, which allowed efficiencies to come in. I will argue, therefore, that business models are absolutely essential. When you do policies, think in terms of the business models that it will generate. As we look across the world at the investment of money in solar, what we are seeing is that while there is a lot of money coming into most countries, including India, there are many countries, particularly the least developed countries in the small island states, where enough money for investment is not coming in. And if it is coming in, it is coming in at very high interest rates. That's true of India also. If you look at the money raised by renewable energy developers, Indian renewable energy developers in the international markets, nobody has got it at less than 7%. And these are companies which are A-rated in India. But they raise at 7%, and equally highly rated companies who are, say, for example, EU or US based, raise it at 2%. This makes money expensive. For solar, it's amazingly important because, as you will see from solar, when I make electricity, 95% of the cost is the cost of the equipment, the panels, the batteries, whatever I put up there. If I look at a fossil fuel plant, 50% of the electricity cost is the cost of the plant. 50% is the cost of coal or gas or whatever is the fossil fuel. In other words, the rate of interest at which I borrow the money to set up the plant is a key determinant of the cost of electricity. And small changes in the rate of interest greatly change the rate of electricity, the price of electricity from these plants. It is very important, therefore, to see how we can reduce the risks in various countries and draw in investment at prices, at interest rates that are a lot more affordable. How do we do that? We do that by creating risk guarantee mechanisms. Thankfully, there are a number of risk guarantee mechanisms in the world. We need to greatly increase them. Whether it is the fact that there is a power purchase agreement. You know, in Rewa, in Madhya Pradesh, for example, a large solar plant was set up whose main risk mitigation was the development of a power purchase agreement between that power plant and the Delhi Metro. This relationship with an A-grade buyer, a buyer who's rated A-grade investment grade, suddenly increased the profile of the plant and reduced its risk. There are other plants where the key issue is a payment guarantee mechanism. They're not sure whether they will be paid, or more importantly, they're not sure when they will be paid, the investors. And consequently, a payment guarantee mechanism, which is typically takes the form of working capital loans, makes the developer last longer than they would without those kinds of monies. The short point is, to enhance the confidence of the investors, we need these risk mitigation mechanisms. And thankfully, at Glasgow this year, a group of organizations led by the Rockefeller Foundation got together to create a $10 billion fund for project preparation and for risk management funds. What I think this will do is help mitigate the risk that is associated with projects in Mali, in Niger, in many places around the world, including mini grids in India. More than anything else, it helps investors to say, okay, I will invest in a solar project because there is a risk mitigation mechanism. Now, they have the policy in place, they have the risk mitigation in place. Therefore, the trillions of dollars that are available for investment, and according to us, the monies that are available for investment in the energy sector are approximately 7 or 8 times what the sector needs. So the monies are available, they can be invested if these are seen as good bets. So, for example, if, for example, what we have been saying is that every multilateral agency and every bilateral agency should establish risk mitigation funds across the world into which people can buy in. Either private sector people or governments can buy in and make them available so that large scale implementation can occur. The third point is to explicitly look at technology development. A solar panel today is the worst panel today has an efficiency of 22%. Only 10 years ago, this was somewhere in the 18% region. That means in 10 years, the efficiency of solar panels has gone up from 18% to 22%. A 20% increase in efficiency from 18 to 22. This obviously has huge amounts of impacts. One of the impacts is that obviously the tariff that was quoted 10 years ago is much higher than the tariff quoted now. As scales have increased, these prices have dropped. How do we take care of these technology developments? As I said earlier, the Andhra example of reneging on older contracts has frozen the investment sector, and therefore leadership in enabling technological developments to be built in is important. I'll give you the example of LED bulbs. In this state of UP, we saw a large amount of LED bulbs being sold. The first time they were sold for something in the vicinity of 380 rupees. The tenders found a price of 310. They are now sold for the order of 70 rupees, with the LED bulbs being supplied to EESL at, I think, 43 rupees or something of that sort. The point I would like to make is that in many of the technologies that we are talking about today, we are seeing huge technological development. And therefore, an ability of the governments and of the buyers to take this into account, these technological developments into account, is part of how we enable the sector to grow. Because you shouldn't expect technologies to be static. You would like them to move. You would like them to provide people with cheaper electricity or cheaper whatever they're producing. And it's not as if this is the first time that is happening. We have seen, for example, how in the electricity sector we moved from to technologies. There used to be 110 and 220 megawatt plants. Then there were supercritical and ultra supercritical plants, and we saw that the technological development meant that sizes had to increase, meant that we had a 7-year cycle in which we saw that the new technology took over approximately 50% of the market. We are also seeing, for example, now a new model to incentivize solar technology developments. And this is the performance-linked incentive program, which has been announced by the government, developed by the Niti Aayog, in which an incentive is provided to manufacturers, but only if they produce cells that are more efficient than a benchmark. So this is so that you don't use yesterday's technologies. And the second is, it is paid only after the sales has been finalized. So it's not that you just produce, it's that you produce and sell. This provides, they initiated it for about 10,000 megawatts. They've got bids worth 55,000. I think 45,000 megawatts have qualified already. This is the manufacturing capacity per year. And consequently, I think what we can look forward to is a large growth in the production of Indian solar panels for use in India and for exports. I would like to suggest that this kind of technological pulling up is important so that we don't get caught into one technology which we import and then stay with it throughout our lives. And then when it becomes, I don't have to give you examples. There are examples in the city of Lucknow in which you have plants which were made for a particular purpose, but never even opened. They were used for something else. Even that has become non-viable now. I'd like to leave you with the thought that pushing technological development is one of the key rationale for governments to be able to push ahead. At the Solar Alliance, we are, number one, helping countries build up capacity. We are not just interested in capacity in designing and maintaining solar plants. That's obviously important. But it's also important that banks should be able to review applications on solar investments. It's also important that policymakers and regulators should be able to look at markets, should be able to look at regulatory mechanisms which enable the solar industry to grow. We are also looking at rather innovative mechanisms like the Green Grid Initiative and the One Sun, One World, One Grid Initiative, which was launched in Glasgow. What did it look at? It looked at the ability to connect different regions of the world. Now, different regions of the world have electricity connections. If you connect, for example, East Asia with India, then when it is dark in East Asia, solar electricity from India can flow there. And similarly, when it is dark in India, a connection from the Gulf grid to India would help solar electricity to flow from the Gulf to India. It is of value to both countries. We look at technological developments of the future completely changing the kinds of paradigms that we have today. I would like to end with the kinds of things that we do. We believe that solar can enhance energy access. It can enhance energy security. You need to import far less. You need to import far less fuel than you needed to, and it can enable the energy transition towards a cleaner economy. It can do all these three things. What does it need for that? Analytics and advocacy, the kind of information that you need, that leaders need, so that they can be comfortable themselves, that solar can provide the cheapest form of energy, or can create jobs, or reduce environment, or reduce imports, whatever is important to them. The second thing that we need is capacity building. As I mentioned a moment ago, across the board, we need to have people, we need to have monies that those people can use. And finally, in many, many, many countries, we need project preparation. Particularly, as I mentioned, the least developed countries and the small island states, we need to hold their hand as the first project is done. As the first project is done, you create the infrastructure, you do the risk mitigation, but you don't want it for one project. You want a second, you want a fifth, you want 100th. That can only happen if policy changes occur. And as the leaders see the kind of difference that the first project makes, it makes them more amenable to do the kinds of policy changes that should enable the second and the fifth and the 100th. With that, let me thank you for your attention and also again apologize for being late, and also to you, Mr. Chopra, for taking more time than I was supposed to. But many, many thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mathur. It was very insightful indeed, and coming from you, from the solar, who heads the Solar Alliance. Well, solar is the future, and I do agree that this holy trinity you spoke about is very, very critical in terms of the entire ecosystem being developed for the solar energy generation. And of course, for any kind of infrastructure, be it industrial or social, energy is a very key and crucial component. So I will now proceed. Mr. Shukla spoke about the defense corridor and the key aspect of development of UP in that context. And we have with us now the next panelist, Sachin Agarwal, who's also a very dear friend. And he's a key member of the Defense Corridor and chairman of the UP chapter and Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers, or SIDM, as we all know. And he's also the managing director of PTC Industries. He's created, of course, a unique world-class manufacturing facility, which kind of ticks all the boxes that infrastructure needs are for manufacturing setup. And also the one I spoke about earlier was the governance from within category. So Sachin, I assume you will focus on what you've created, and of course, in the context of what you've done with UP as a state in particular. Over to you, Sachin.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for the very kind introduction. I'll try to present. How much time do you have?
Well, you have about 15 minutes. So take your time.
I won't take that much. So I'll try to share my screen. So I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, sir, we are able to see.
Yeah, we can see to it. Fine. Please go ahead, sir.
All right. So thank you very much again. Thanks, LMA, for this opportunity. We have, as Shukla sir talked about earlier, about the capability and the opportunity that exists within the country, especially in context to UP and what kind of capabilities can be developed in the defense corridor. We have set up a brand new facility called our Advanced Manufacturing Technology Center in Lucknow, and this is what we call our Advanced Manufacturing Technology Center. The ultimate aim of this facility is to create parity in terms of technology, quality, knowledge, skill, workmanship, all type of infrastructure in the sphere of metal and metal components at a equal footing with the rest of the world. So for that, we have brought in many different technologies. We have developed different metal component technologies within our company, and have a very vibrant R&D system that works where we develop new products and processes, and have a incubation area from proof of concept to incubation, and from incubation into production. So I'll just walk through some of those things that we have done in this presentation. Our company started in actually Lucknow way back in 1963. So we have been in business for almost close to 60 years, 58 years, but we have been exporting for mainly about 35 to 40 years all over the world, right from US, Europe, everywhere. We had started as a casting and metal component manufacturers in steel and ferrous alloys all over Europe. But now we are also into right from oil and gas all the way to aerospace and defense as well now. And we expanded our metal offerings right from ferrous, nickel to copper, as well as titanium and other super alloys. We have received a variety of awards, right from a National Award for R&D to Time Magazine Awards and Forbes India and Rolls-Royce Cost Leadership Awards. Our business is split into 6 groups: industrial products in AMTC, to investment casting products, again industrial in our Ahmedabad facility, a newly inaugurated Aeroloi Technologies, which is purely an aerospace facility created for aerospace metal components, inaugurated a few days back by the Honorable Raksha Mantri. A new facility which is coming up is in Lucknow, again, is our aerospace metals group, as well as a powder metallurgy facility, which we have created, India's only titanium powder manufacturing capability, and our precision machining divisions. As I mentioned, there are a plethora of technologies that we have related to metal and metal components. So the way we work is that we just don't take up technologies and produce, employ them, but we also keep on developing. So currently we have around 8 to 10 different technologies which are under production, but there are another 5 to 6 which are under incubation, another 5 to 6 which are under R&D. So that kind of a loop continues throughout. So there's a pipeline of technologies always which are in the under development and incubation. We have employed a variety of advanced manufacturing techniques, right from CAD, CAM modeling to simulation to 3D printing. We also use artificial intelligence, video analytics, and machine learning in our production systems as well to improve operational efficiency. All these technologies are being employed, whatever you call Industry 4.0 or smart manufacturing capabilities are being employed in our production systems, in our operations on a day-to-day basis, and is part of all our manufacturing operations and processes. Besides this, in our operations and manufacturing, we have used a lot of automation and robotics to automate those type of operations which are critical to quality, and that's why manual intervention could lead to some inconsistency in quality, given this very critical nature of the applications of the parts and components that we manufacture, right from oil and gas sector, industrial sector, all the way to aerospace and defense. Consistency in quality and dependency on quality is of prime importance, and accuracy is also, preciseness is also a very, very important aspect of it. So that's why we employed a lot of these capabilities in-house. So we have a robot, we have the world's largest robot in the world. We have machining robots. We have, for various applications, we have developed these robotic applications. We also have India's only titanium and super alloy casting manufacturing facility, which has been set up. We are the only manufacturer of titanium parts in the country, titanium castings in the country. And this technology was partially brought from outside and partially developed in-house by our R&D team, and which is under production. This has helped in kind of creating that Atmanirbhar, self-reliant goal set by the government, so that many of those things which were earlier being imported into the country for various applications are now being manufactured here. We have also have a hot isostatic pressing. There's another technology which was not available. So all these things are being driven by the concept of creating a parity within the country. Our country should have all those technologies which it has been not provided or kept away from, and we've tried to bring in those technologies within the country to fill in those gaps so that a full ecosystem of defense and aerospace manufacturing could develop within the country. Another very key missing technology is controlled microstructure castings, which are used in aerofoils or aero engine components. This is the facility which was inaugurated by Honorable Raksha Mantri a few weeks back, where we are able to we'll be making components for the aero engines and other aero applications as well. We have a very elaborate and comprehensive machining capability, right from all types of machining, CNC machining capability, all the way to 5-axis, 6-axis machining capability. India's largest 5-axis machine to one of the largest computerized measuring machines. All those capabilities have been brought under the single roof. Another facility that is coming up, for which the foundation stone was also laid down by the Raksha Mantri a couple of weeks back, is an integrated metals manufacturing facility for manufacturing metal raw materials for some exotic products like titanium, zirconium, and other such super nickel alloy and super cobalt alloy materials, which are currently not being produced within the country and are all imported. So again, from the driving from our principle or dharma of parity. A fully integrated material testing facility, because we are a metal and material related company. We are setting up along with collaboration with the MOD a material testing facility within the defense corridor, a lab which will allow all companies in this ecosystem, in this area, to be able to get the materials tested. It will be a state of the art with every kind of material testing equipment available in this lab. So as I mentioned, a lot of parts which were earlier being imported for aerospace and as well as for non-aerospace and defense applications, requiring such special materials, exotic materials or processes, have now been indigenized by us, and we are also exporting that out of the country. So just walk through. So I think this is basically what SP Shukla sir also talked about earlier, having capability to the integrators in the top and component manufacturers and material suppliers in the below. Our focus is to fill the area of this component manufacturing and processed materials in various air, land, strategic systems for missiles, all the way up to space systems, land systems, as well as naval and sea applications. So we have done a full study about what type of materials there are gaps within the country in all the 6 or 5 services, and what materials we have a cross-platform applications as well as component manufacturing capability for them. So I think that's my short presentation about us. I think it will be better to have some Q&A later on in the session, sir. So I'll end my presentation.
Thank you, Sachin. That was a brilliant tour of your facility, and we have just a couple of minutes before we can, wrap up this session. Are there any questions? Anybody on the screen? I don't see any questions coming up, but if there are any questions, if anybody wants to ask a question, please unmute yourself and let me know which panelist you're addressing this to, and we can get you an answer if we can in this short period of time.
They can only post the question through Q&A box, and we have to take the question accordingly.
I have not seen anything on the Q&A box, so no questions so far. So we are already close to the end of our session. So I'll just quickly summarize what has been spoken in this session.
मैं WhatsApp number डॉक्टर महेंद्र भंडारी का भेजा है अभी email पर. देखो अगर बात हो जाए तो उनसे पूछिए.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly, summarize the gist of what has been spoken in this session. I'll start with Mr. Shukla. Mr. Shukla from the Mahindra Defense and Mahindra Aerospace spoke about development in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Well, it has certainly been unprecedented. As they say, good politics always makes good economics. And I think as a result of all of this, if UP grows, India grows. So I think our GDP in the state's GDP has a huge contribution to the country's GDP. Of course, especially in the sector. Mr. Shukla also touched upon the hub and spoke and the cluster model, especially in the context of the defense corridor. He touched upon various sectors where UP can multiply, so their opportunities are immense. Quickly, Dr. Ajay Mathur, he spoke about the Holy Trinity, which is so crucial for any model to be successful. And therefore, he spoke about policies, especially the mini grid policy and the various business models and technology and the relevance to the solar energy sector and the ecosystem for the same. He also spoke about the key role policy plays for one of the key elements of any kind of infrastructure, be it industrial or social. And he spoke about the trinity of policy, business models, and technologies, particularly in the context of solar and the success, how much it depends on this trinity for any infrastructure component. Sachin, of course, thank you for sharing details of your business model that you have so brilliantly curated in your manufacturing plant, one of its kind facility right here in Lucknow. Truly, the limitless possibilities in materials and technology open new avenues every day, and staying ahead of the curve is what you are striving for. So our defense sector is that much more Atmanirbhar with companies like yourselves. Thank you, everyone. I would like to thank all my panelists for a very insightful and brilliant session. So over to you, Mr. Mathur. You can carry on with the next.
Thank you, Kiran, for so ably chairing this session. And thank you all the speakers for their very insightful presentations. Now we go on to our next session. Our second session is on making a quantum jump in Human Development Index with inclusive growth. And our session chairman is Professor Subir Bhatnagar, Vice Chancellor Ram Manohar Lohia Law University. Professor Bhatnagar completed his LLM from Kurukshetra University and PhD Law from Rohtak University, Haryana. Professor Bhatnagar has worked in various capacities. Oh, can you hear me? He has worked in various capacities in Baba Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Lucknow. He was the acting Vice Chancellor of BBAU, Lucknow from 2001 to 2007 and has served almost for 4 decades as a law teacher in university departments. He was the member of the first academic council of the National Law School, Bangalore in 1987. He has been nominated by the Chief Justice of India as the member of the Executive Council of Indian Law Institute in 2006. Based on his long teaching and research experience, he has contributed in many reputed institutions of national repute, like Himachal National Law University, Assam National Law University, Delhi University, Aligarh Muslim University, Silchar, Jammu, Patna, Asansol, Bhopal, Sirsa, Nainital, Allahabad, and Karnataka University in Gujarat. Professor Bhatnagar has published around 3 dozen papers in reputed journals and edited books. and he has been a member of editorial and advisory boards of reputed law journals. So that was about Professor Subir Bhatnagar. Our first speaker in the session is Dr. Rukmani Banerjee, Chief Executive Officer of Pratham Education Foundation. Welcome, Dr. Rukmani Banerjee. She was trained as an economist at St. Stephen's College and Delhi School of Economics. She was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University and completed her PhD at the University of Chicago in 1991. Dr. Rukmani Banerjee returned to India in 1996 and joined Pratham. Over the years, she has worked extensively in Pratham's education programs in rural and urban areas. Along with her teams, she has played a major role in designing and supporting large-scale partnerships with the state governments in India for improving children's learning outcomes. Dr. Rukmani Banerjee led Pratham's research and assessment efforts, including the annual status of education report, ASER, exercise from 2005 to 14. And since 2015, she has been the CEO of Pratham. Originally from Bihar, Dr. Banerjee is now based between Delhi and Pune. She writes frequently on education in both Hindi and English daily in India and enjoys writing books and stories for children. She has a number of publications to her credit, and we look forward to hearing from her on education issues of basic education. Our second speaker of the session is Professor Alok Kumar Rai. Professor Rai is a professor of marketing at the Institute of Business Studies, Banaras Hindu University, and currently Vice Chancellor of the University of Lucknow. Professor Rai holds expertise in the areas of customer relationship management, marketing management, and entrepreneurship development. He has to his credit over 75 publications that include 6 authored and 4 edited books, and numerous book chapters, articles, and research papers in leading academic journals of consequence. Customer Loyalty, Concept, Context, and Character, published by McGraw-Hill Limited, was the first book on the subject of customer loyalty in the country. He holds 5 IPRs in the field of his research, over 75 publications that include 6 authored and 4 edited books, and numerous book chapters, articles, and research papers in leading academic journals of consequence. At the University of Lucknow, he is spearheading the development of universities' policies and programs to establish extraordinary standards of education, enrich the experience of learning, and reinvigorating the connection between learners and the society. Professor Rai is leading this university towards creating an impact bigger and better than ever before. He has actually been successful to a great extent in achieving a transformative change in the university. With this innovative approach and leadership, we can expect to see this illustrious institution regain its old glory. So that was about Professor Alok Rai. And our next speaker is Professor Mahin Bhandari, Senior Scientist and Director, Research, Henry Ford Hospital System, Detroit, USA. He'll be speaking to us from the US. Dr. Bhandari, MS Surgery, MCH Urology, FAMS, FNA, SC, DSc Honoris Causa, MBA, Michigan. Is the former Vice Chancellor, King George's Medical University, Lucknow, from 2003 to 2006. Director, Sanjay Gandhi Postgraduate Institute of Medical Sciences, Lucknow, and founder, Vice Chancellor, Mediversity of Apollo Health Care System, Hyderabad, from 2000 to 2001. He has published some 2,050 papers in peer-reviewed journals and written several chapters in textbooks. Dr. Bhandari is recipient of Padma Shri in the year 2000 and Dr. B.C. Roy Award for the development of specialties in 1996. Smithsonian National Museum of American History exhibits his special O1 visa under Extraordinary Brilliant Category EB1, recognizing immigrants who have significantly contributed to the US as well as their native country of origin in the past 500 years. Only two doctors, Dr. Mani Menon and Dr. Mahendra Bhandari, are exhibited. Dr. Menon was recognized for development of robotic surgery, and Dr. Bhandari's contribution was recognized for bringing robotic surgery to India. He received President's Award of American Urology Association. Dr. Bhandari is past President, Urology Society of India, past President, Indian Society Organ Transplantation, President, Asian Society of Transplantation, founder, editor, Indian Journal of Urology, member, editorial board, British Journal of Urology International, and lastly, but not the least, past president of Lucknow Management Association. I may share with you that LMA's performance during his one-year tenure rose to unprecedented heights. Dr. Bhandari will present his views on how we can make economic growth inclusive of healthcare. Then our next speaker is Dr. Arvind Mohan. Dr. Arvind Mohan is professor, Department of Economics, University of Lucknow. He was earlier director of Institute of Management Sciences, director, Institute of Developmental Studies, director, Population Research Center, and director, Planning and Development. He was Dean Academics, Lucknow University till recently. Dr. Arvind Mohan handled several prestigious consultancy assignments and high-profile international exposure. He was consulted World Bank for various assignments, including lendings to governments worth billions of dollars, and consultant UNDP, UNICEF, USAID. He was invited by American government as international visitor, guided UN interns from Ivy League institutions like Harvard, MIT, University of Columbia, Sussex, Melbourne. And he was India advisor to Arthur D. Little Consulting Group, the group that designed India's parliamentary structure. Dr. Arvind Mohan has been mandated several assignments by the government of Uttar Pradesh, quite a few of them. Dr. Arvind Mohan has published about 120 publications, and with many with World Bank, ILO, UNDP, etc. He is MA, university topper with all times record marks, Chancellor's Medal, and a PhD. I will now hand over to Professor Subir Bhatnagar for his opening remarks and taking the session forward. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. A.K. Mathur Sahab. Very good evening. The theme of this convention is Governance Imperatives of Economic Transformations of Uttar Pradesh. But this session is devoted to making quantum jump in Human Development Index with inclusive growth. The concept note, which is attached with the theme of session 2, this session, that focuses on education and health, which can guarantee a quantum jump in SDI ranking, more particularly in Uttar Pradesh. You know that education has the liberating power, Sa Vidya Ya Vimukti. That is that kind of education which can liberate us. Education empowers the individuals and the societies. It enables a person to earn his livelihood, and a nice livelihood reduces poverty and gives individuals a sense of belongingness. And this ensures an inclusive growth and hits at the inequalities in the society. The National Education Policy of 2020 is a good policy, but it would require more investment in this sector. A robust and effective monitoring system, that is very much important. Monitoring system also needs to be developed. COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted many programs of education in UP. It has also disrupted the functioning of the educational institutions, basic, primary, secondary, and higher education institutions also, even the research institutions also. We need to focus on this pandemic also, and for ensuring inclusiveness in the post, or I can say during COVID-19 in the education sector. We can divide UP into two parts, urban sector and the rural segment. And in the rural segment, the children and the students of the universities and colleges who do not have tablet or any device, even smartphone, laptop, they have been affected greatly by this particular pandemic. Next point, which is in this particular session is to be taken up, is related to health. And we have seen that in recent months, the health sector is getting more attention. The private sector has made good inroads in health sector. But pandemic has again taught us many lessons. Jaan hai, to jahan hai. So we need to invest more in pharmaceuticals, high-tech or high-end medical devices, digital telemedicine, home care, because I was also affected by this second wave, and I was within the confines of my home. I was not hospitalized. I could gather, or I could imagine the importance of home care also. So home care for all, but more for senior citizens. Side by side, we need to encourage medical tourism in this state of Uttar Pradesh. We can go ahead with the PPP model, public-private partnership model. One important thing about health sector is that it can promote more revenue along with more employment opportunities. Because, you know, women dominate among the healthcare professionals. And in that way, it ensures their social upliftment also. And this is a good cause for inclusive growth. So we need to move from that is curative healthcare to wellness programs also. As UN chief last year said that this pandemic, relating to pandemic, is a social crisis, is an economic crisis, is a human crisis. And then he said it is a human rights crisis also. So from legal or constitutional point of view, it is a human rights crisis. We have recognized very specifically in the Constitution, right to education, right to health is also recognized by the Supreme Court. There is no doubt about it. And we have to focus on Uttar Pradesh, that how can we improve educational facilities and health facilities, and in what way more investment can be attracted in the state of UP, keeping in mind that there will be inclusive growth also. It's not top layer growth. It trickles down to, whether I should use the term trickle down or not, it trickles down to the rural side also, so that they can also take the fruits of development so far as education and health are concerned. With these words, I would like to invite the first panelist, Dr. Rukmani Banerjee, who is Chief Executive Officer of Pratham Education Foundation. Madam Dr. Rukmani Banerjee, please, for your presentation.
Thank you, sir. I'd really like to thank Lucknow Management Association, as always, for inviting me to a panel like this. मेरे साथ बाकी सारे जो लोग हैं, they are from esteemed institutions of higher learning, and so I feel the responsibility of represented, and as we are hopefully coming out of COVID in the school sector, mere upar hai. So I welcome the opportunity, and I will try to be brief because I know we have many speakers. I wanted to just actually present a few numbers, just say it becomes very clear what kind of a challenge we are facing. And on human capital, there are so many things to talk about, but I'm going to focus only on two issues. My own organization Pratham, as you can tell from the name, हम लोग प्राथमिक शिक्षा में and पूर्व प्राथमिक में ज़्यादा काम करते हैं. And in the new education policy that was unveiled last year, there is a statement which I'm thinking of framing and putting in my own office, which says that if we do not achieve as a country foundational literacy and numeracy for all children by the time they are in standard 3, then the rest of the policy becomes irrelevant. And I think this is a very, very major step and a very bold step that the new education policy has taken. And I think it provides, I would say, a very good way for everybody to harness their resources, because agar hamari building की नींव मजबूत बन जाए तो फिर उसके ऊपर बहुत सारे floors हम बना सकते हैं. But if the foundation is weak, then many of the things that Dr. Bhatnagar has talked about, inclusive, taking everybody along, probably will not happen. So if I focus first, and I'm going to share my screen briefly. If we focus first on just enrollment numbers, we all know that enrollment numbers, which is basically our children enrolled in school, have been very high. Now, we have been in Pratham producing this annual status of education, because it's a state very close to the national average on many things. So you can see that whether it is UP, whether it is Karnataka, whether it is India, almost 10 years and more, we have been at very high enrollment levels. Now, in my work, I spend quite a lot of time, at least I used to, in schools, in Prathamik Vidyalaya mein. And the best definition of enrollment I have heard came from a school in Sultanpur, from some children in 4th standard. So I was trying to ask the children कि बोर्ड पे जो लिखा हुआ है वो पढ़ पाते हैं कि नहीं, and हमेशा एटलीस्ट सरकारी स्कूल के ब्लैक बोर्ड पे नामांकन इन उपस्थिति लिखी रहती है, on a daily basis. So I asked the children, because both are quite difficult words, so I asked them to read, and one child read namankan, and I asked कि namankan का मतलब क्या होता है, and without thinking, without batting an eyelid, the child said नामांकन का मतलब है कि मेरा नाम स्कूल आ गया है. So you can see कि मेरा नाम स्कूल आ गया है. 98% बच्चों का नाम स्कूल तक पहुंच गया है. And for a country of our size and complexity, I think this is a huge achievement. For a state like UP, the biggest state in the country, to be able to get 95% of children enrolled in school is a very major job. Now, but sirf school aana is not enough. As my young friend in 4th standard went to the next word, कि उपस्थिति का क्या मतलब है? तो उपस्थिति का मतलब है, it was a hard word to read, but he knew what it was. He said उपस्थिति का मतलब है कि हम भी आ गए हैं. So what we need is, we need high enrollment, we need high regular attendance, both of which are going to be major issues as now we come out of COVID, that we need to bring everybody back to school and they need to attend regularly, because that then provides us with the necessary condition for what we mean by accumulating human capital. But coming to school regularly must result in a certain value add. And wo value add, let us say we call it learning. Before, in earlier days, education was a combination of schooling and learning. In fact, if you think of the words we use in Hindi or Bangla or other words, we say likhna padna as part of what is education. And so if we think about that and we look at the new education policy, what are our children's basic levels of foundational literacy and numeracy? So I wanted to show you कि COVID के पहले की हालत क्या थी. Now, if I go to, let me go to the next slide. Let me start with Karnataka, and I'll tell you why I'm starting with Karnataka. The Karnataka results show you, as you can see here, that 2014, 2016, 2018, if I look at a very simple math, I knew that I would have a lot of scientists on my panel. So I felt, or economists, so that I should show you some of these numbers. You can see, from these numbers that more or less the levels were not high. Now, if you see subtraction, 2-digit subtraction, 85 minus 17, this is a level which by the end of second standard, our textbooks and our curriculum expect children to do. And you can see that in Karnataka, before COVID, we had almost, let us say, 1/4 of the children who were able to do it. But as you look at 2020, we were able to do one field survey even in 2020 before the second wave. There is a big drop. So our numbers were not very good before COVID. We had only 1/4 of the children who were at grade level from 2014 onwards. And now after COVID, you find that number has gone to only about 15 or 16%, which means that if we have to reach the new education policy's goal, this number has to become 100%. And that is the real task, I think, that the country has to take on. I'm not even discussing the numbers for standard 5 and standard 8, but you can see that even in standard 8, simple division is a problem for a very large number of children. Now, isi ke saath saath, if we look at UP, which is the focus of our discussion for today, we will see a very similar picture, except that given the size of UP and given that UP has been working on schooling and learning in coming from a much lower, perhaps baseline, we can see that even before before COVID, our grade level numbers in UP were quite low. I'm showing you both numbers from government schools. So where in Karnataka, 1/4 of children were at grade level in standard 3. In UP, this number was close to 1 out of 10 or 11 children out of 100, which means कि UP में भी बहुत काम करने की ज़रूरत है to shore up this basic foundation, which then provides the basis for really equality in education as we go further. In UP, we have not been able to do a face-to-face household survey like we did in Karnataka, but you can expect that if in Karnataka there has been a drop of close to 8% or 10%, UP, maybe if you see a similar drop, it would mean that standard 3 children today who actually went to school for only for a little while 2 years ago in standard 1, we have a long way to come back. Now, in terms of what action to take, I want to leave my panelists and listeners with a positive hope that this is the problem of low learning is not a new one for India. And Uttar Pradesh, as a state which has been dealing with this problem, has done quite a bit. Now you can see already, even the 2018 numbers in UP are substantially more than 2016. Whereas in the Karnataka, these numbers have been very stable. So UP had already undertaken some strong efforts to improve learning. And I want to share with you one more slide, that if I look at our ASER data year on year, to see that in a usual year, kitna improvement ho pata hai bachcho ka. And we find, and again, I don't want to drown you with numbers, that depending on the grade, depending on the year, depending on the cohort, in a usual year, somewhere between 5 to 15 percentage points improvement hota hai, which is actually quite a low level. But that's not unusual of UP. That is the kind of level across India. But in 2018-19, the government of UP, and we were in partnership, Pratham was in partnership with them, took on a learning improvement program, a very focused program to raise the learning levels of children from the level that you see. And there we saw, and I've shown you some numbers here, that in a period of 2 to 3 months, UP government across the state in 120, 1.2 lakh schools was able, through the existing resources, existing teachers, to actually come up with a learning gain which was equal to what is normally done in a school year. So I want to leave you with this thought that as we are coming out of COVID, there is a big opportunity to rebuild our human capital back, aim for the foundational literacy numeracy goal that our national education policy lays out, by really focusing on how to rebuild basic reading and basic math. This may require putting aside the curriculum for those grades for some time, just so that we can work on these basic skills. And our own UP system, the government school system, has shown from its prior experience that agar curriculum of these grades ko thoda bagal mein rakha jaye, big gains can be achieved. We have about 15 weeks left in this school year. And I would say that even in those 15 weeks, a lot of lost ground could be made up, so that slowly our foundations for any further learning can be strengthened in UP, and it can be done by the government system itself. So I'll stop there and hand over back to Professor Bhatnagar.
Thank you, Madam Dr. Rukmani Banerjee. You have painted the realities of school education, and we just hear all these stories, and you work there. That is the practical side of the story you have just painted here before us. Thank you very much. Now I would invite Professor Alok Kumar Rai, who is the Vice Chancellor of University of Lucknow. Professor A.K. Roy, sir.
I hope I'm audible.
Audible.
Very good evening, everyone. Most respected Professor Bhatnagar and other panelists and their participants. I'm happy to be part of this LMA convention, which is focusing on inclusive growth. Now, I hail from a subject of management, marketing in particular, and belong to a sector many people actually don't like the education to be termed as industry. So I'm using a term sector. Otherwise, for all practical purpose, this is also an industry. And I have been working with this industry for over 20 years now, and have been working in this industry in different capacities: as teacher, as professional, as consultant, as trainer, as administrator, and have got exposed to different aspects. Now, what educational industry or sector can contribute towards creating inclusive growth, aiming at furthering Human Development Index or human development in general, is an area that I believe is the core topic of this session. Now, to start with, I prefer to talk about the very purpose of any educational institution. As I said, my background says this. The purpose of any educational institution is student. Purpose means the very reason for existence of an organization. So it is the student which is the purpose of existence of any educational institution. Now, student has a peculiar character, unlike the receiver of other industries. And here, that student is not just the customer of the industry, but also the product of the industry. We process student to be consumed by the society for the good of the society. And student is the one who actually feeds us, who makes us function. In both the cases, student is an outcome of the society. So institution also comes from society and goes into the society, but after the processing done on the students by the educational institution, interestingly, this processing on student is not only and exclusively done by the institution. So there are a variety of stakeholders that affect the making of the outcome of student as customer, which goes back to the society. But then, as an educational institution, what are our aims? So we started with purpose. Now I'm talking about aim. So what is the core bottom line of our role as an institution? I believe it is the value addition that we all need to aim at for our students. When I talk of value addition, I talk of value exploration, I talk of value creation, and I also talk of value delivery. So value addition through value exploration, value creation, and value delivery. Now, value operates in an ecosystem which has numerous antecedents. But then we also need to comprehend what is value. So value basically is a function of benefit upon with respect to cost. So it is the benefit that the student gets vis-a-vis the time, energy, and expenditure that the student incurs with respect to the benefit that needs to be assessed. Now, we as an educational institution, if I compare University of Lucknow vis-a-vis Banaras University, or right now I'm sitting at Dr. Bhim Rao Ambedkar University at Agra. Now, if I compare University of Lucknow with Banaras University or Dr. Bhim Rao Ambedkar University Agra, where do I see that students' place University of Lucknow at? And what, as an educational institution, would I want University of Lucknow to pursue to increase the value, to enhance the value that our students get? You know, there are two things. If value is a function of benefit upon cost, to increase value, we can either increase the numerator or reduce the denominator, or simultaneously do both. So as an educational institution also, we strive to further the value augmentation. Another important thing is that since there is a change in the society that is taking place, this, because of societal change, which is popularly termed as Society 4.0. Now, for students, the sustained success of the students coming out of these educational institutions, we need Education 4.0. So, Student 4.0 through Education 4.0 to map with the requirement of Society 4.0. And here comes a very, very important role of educational institution. Now, whether the governance of the system can evolve itself to include different stakeholders, because different stakeholders have got different essentials. Like, we have a student in the educational institution who can again be male and female with different peculiarities. We have teachers, we have officials, we have non-teaching staff, we have parents, we have recruiters, we have alumni, and last but not the least, we have society. for what is essential is inclusive governance. So for student to match the requirement of Society 4.0, we need to incarnate Education 4.0. For we have to have inclusive governance for inclusive growth. So now I come to where I started with. For growth, what is the role of educational institutions, especially higher educational institution, in inclusive growth for augmentation of human development or enhancement of human development index? Now, there are several initiatives that we at University of Lucknow has initiated for inclusive growth. This may have social as well as financial repercussions by different stakeholders for different stakeholders. Like what we've done is we have put students on all committees, on almost all the committees that are related to the decision making pertaining to students. Our teachers, officials, and other students, even postdoc students, some of the postdoc students have adopted these students and the financial needs of those students who lost their parents in COVID. We also run community kitchen for 2 full months, and with not a single penny spent by the university. So all through donations. We made free education and free hostel to all female tribal students who started taking admission to our. The aim is inclusive growth. We have launched several pro-student schemes like student OPD scheme, teaching, reaching, emboldening and evolving scheme, which is a unique mentoring scheme. Then we introduced Shodhameda Chhatravritti. We introduced the Karma Yogi scheme, which was a kind of earn while learn scheme. Especially for our female students, we got their hemoglobin tests. We created community toilets. The institution also took up the care of TB patients as an agenda. And we have been successful in reducing the number and bringing them out of this COVID TB bracket. We have also at University of Lucknow, we have adopted Anganwadis as suggested by Honorable Her Excellency, Anganwadis, and we have been taking care of the needs. Now, through education, this inclusion is important because it is the educational institution which is part of the society. If it gives something back directly to the society tends to be empathetic and then thus becomes contributing to the institution, which is a must, not just for the institution, but also for the society. Because again, I'll bring back to that core of that student is not just the customer, but also the product. So this is all that I had to talk about with respect to this theme. Thank you very much for providing me an opportunity to be part of it. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Professor Alok Kumar Rai ji. You are doing wonders at Lucknow University, no doubt about that. And you have reimagined the role of university in the society, in the community also. And you have tried and you have been successful also to connect the university system with the community also. So thank you very much for that. Now, may I invite Professor Mahendra Bhandari ji, who is a senior bioscientist and director of research at Henry Ford Hospital System, Detroit, the United States of America. Professor Bhandari, please.
Thank you, Professor Bhatnagar. At the outset, I must thank Lucknow Management Association and my friend, Mr. Mathur, for having invited me. And let me make it very clear. I am no expert on this subject, but whatever I am going to talk, usually my work is with big data and AI model building, and we build computer vision models as a research. For a change, I thought this subject is more apt for not talking about data. So please pardon my subjectivity, and this would be an anecdotal journey which I had. I'm married to my wife from Madhya Pradesh, and they happen to have villages. And for 50 years, it is my passion to visit their village. And I have seen that. And for last 19 years, I'm associated with the Shivgad Saksham project on infant mortality. And that is my passion. Every time I don't look at data, I just talk to the people. I was so happy to hear Professor Rukmani Banerjee's comment, because that is the kind of message I want to give. That is not the boardroom decisions made by the elite of the world or Nobel laureates. It is what you get, the stories from within the people. And one thing more I would like to say that health and education are so intertwined that I want to tell that why the learning is so poor, why learning indices are poor, is because of the malnutrition to a great extent and poor neurodevelopment, which has been proved by a paper from Arti and Vishwajit on the intervention they did. So it has a very big ramification, both go hand in hand. And I would like to share my screen and some slides. Could you see my screen, please?
Yes, we can see.
Sir, it is very much there. Carry on, please, sir.
Thank you very much. The question is, it's very impressive to listen and talk and read about 5 trillion economy, but I feel that it's very important to reiterate that healthcare and education needs to be, and it's all in understanding, in practice, it is inclusive, I know, but it doesn't have that kind of recognition. This is global. We have a lot to learn from Brexit and United States or all developed countries. There's no question economic growth would widen disparity between poor and rich. And this one graph which shows from United States, US Census Bureau, if you see that how over a period of time, the median household income goes down in comparison to the GDP. Now, we need to grapple, and we don't have to repeat these stories, that whenever there is a disparity, there would be social unrest, there is a criminality, and all lot of factors which would come into play. This is the best example I could get. In 2017, I picked up the Guardian to find out that Anand Mohan was talking, who is an expert on Europe and from King's College London at the Newcastle, convincing people on how it would adversely affect if the Brexit happened. And one of the lady from back said, that is your bloody GDP, it is not mine. And it makes a lot of sense in terms of, all I'm trying to say, that if we don't measure health and education, we cannot improve it. And that's where the emphasis is on. Whenever we talk of health, though I spent my lifetime in curative medicine, but for India, the curative medicine is not the way. But if you go the usual GDP route of economic growth, it is bound to be, moment there is a more purchasing power or the household income, it would be spent on curative medicine. And we are not looking for a society which is disease-free, we are looking for a healthy society. And that's where the preventive care comes into. Now, I'll give example. There was mentioned by the chairman of the session on the home health monitoring. This is a couple of years ago, I visited my village in Madhya Pradesh, and I talked to the people, they know me because I've been going there for years. And this gentleman who sustained a hemiplegia, I was talking to him, he walked with a stick with the residual hemiplegia. And he said, sir, do something, this kind of disease is very prevalent. I asked him about blood pressure and all. He has no idea what the blood pressure is. And this is totally preventable disability. After that, very little can be done. So I think a simple 62% of us, urban or rural, do not know that we have blood pressure. We know only when the target organ is damaged, either kidney is damaged, or you have heart attack, or you have the kind of person I showed you. When we talk of preventive care, and particularly I'm enthused to talk about personal hygiene because I have witnessed from United States the tremendous success of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. We can do it. There is no question we can do it if there is a right kind of political messaging. But that is a real thing in the villages. If you see, there is no discrimination between the animal, cattle, and the people live there. Somebody will sleep there in the night. So why do we think that we won't be the harboring the all kind of infections? It is the kindness of the bacteria and things that it doesn't happen. So I think our standards of hygiene needs to be looked into. Another factor which Dr. Srinath Reddy pointed out in a seminal presentation, and there is a data to prove from one of our fellows who is clocked in from the Harvard system of medicine, wherein they've shown that African Americans have a poor access to the healthcare. And that's why they have the extremes of diseases, even the terminal stage cancers. Same thing is going to happen to India. I believe it is better to leave people to themselves. It's a historical statement, than to provide them with a poor quality of healthcare, because that brings a false confidence in them and they don't do what even otherwise they would do it. Now you look at this data of Srinath's paper, I believe that deaths due to poor quality of care is much, much higher, 1.6 million, in comparison to the deaths due to utilization of healthcare services. So definitely this factor needs to be done. Why I wanted to be subjective? Because there are people who are out of sight, which do not fall in our abstract or globalization, our policies which are across the country or the state. This boy, I have seen him growing, is a polio victim, and polio is a very little handicap. He could be made to walk, but he has a big ulcer. He has an intellect, he has aspirations, but we cannot do anything to him. Even I offered the help, but the logistic is so difficult to take him to Indore, get some surgery done and heal. And this can only be picked up if the planners go to the periphery themselves, not collect the data through what they have. Health brings another point of personal touch. And I think it should be emphasized. They deliver in their environment, they deliver in primary healthcare centers, but they look for totally uncared for. And what makes a difference is the kind of compassion you see. And I just clicked this photo when Aarti was talking to the mother of the person. It makes all the difference. And that is what is lacking in our looking at the big picture and getting into the indices of the World Bank or the global thing. That's very important politically, but we cannot ignore the sight of the people. Now, how is going to happen? It needs disruptive changes in the medical education. I'm going against my own specialty because our medicine is totally westernized It is totally curative medicine, which is not cost effective in India. Because with the advances, the gulf between out-of-pocket payment for complex diseases would be more and more difficult for developing countries like us. We need a medicine which is totally different, and that needs to be bringing our holistic systems, not by creating separate ministry, but bringing an integrated medicine, which is the mind, body, and soul. And that is what is needed for the villagers, not treating by donating some money and getting a heart wall replaced in the first place. We should be able to eradicate rheumatic heart disease itself. Happiness is beyond material assets. That's why further I support my subjective presentation, and I will revoke Bobby Kennedy, who said about the GDP measures everything except for its which is worthwhile, and that is the poverty of satisfaction. He said that we'll have to battle. He said at that time, battle satisfaction even if we achieve economic indices, purpose and dignity, and a sense of happiness for people. This is a slide. November, I was in India. I went to Shivgarh. And before that, I was in Hague, in Netherlands. And there I walked into a farmers, villagers market. And I found a lot of similarity. But you look at the happiness, they're looking at the Netherlands overall average income. Their income is not much. They came in a truck. They sold few things like scarves and all. And when I bought one, I talked to these ladies, and what I feel is we can replicate the same. Our children have the same dreams in their eyes. And at this stage, they are looking towards us as individuals, as personals, not showing the data that India has jumped up in an index. You see the confidence in the faces of these children, which you will really enthuse you to do. One thing it includes me also. We collect the best of the brains to design programs for the children, but we don't have an appetite to listen to these people. Answers come from them, and that is my passion. Talk to them how self-help group works. We have an overall picture how it should work or how we have designed to work, but the stories come out are totally divergent from that. Now, exactly like what I would say that I was talking to this girl in Madhya Pradesh, and I said, and suddenly I discovered that she goes to two schools. One is the government school. She comes for taking the benefits, but she's from a Muslim family. She goes to another school for madrasa or whatever it is. I did not know these things, and I'm sure politicians, I mean, say the people who manage these policies know. It's totally getting the economic benefit that also needs to be looked into from the point of view. A potter who gives you the true story of what an entrepreneur should be. Look at the happiness. He sells 60 kullards, I think 1,000 kullards for 60 rupees and gives to a local thing. And nobody needs to told him that you can expand your business to this, you can reskill yourself. But this is what the gaps I would like to say. So messaging needs to be relooked into. We at Shivgarh analyze the posters made for the breastfeeding, and you see the understanding is totally different. It's totally different. They don't understand. They think they have not seen the cross mark. They think all these things should not be done. So I think it requires a little more different approach. It's my passion to cycle with the whole team for 15 to 20 miles, visit from morning to evening villages and talk to them. Whatever they are worth, I don't know, but I thought this is a platform I should share. I must thank Aarti and Vishwajit, who have been my local people who kept feeding. We had an enormous experiment during COVID. I was in touch with them. And you should know that ultra poor were not that affected with COVID because of the natural social distancing. They were, I talked to one of the NGOs because one of the function of my foundation is NGOs also. So I think this is all. Thank you very much once again, and I appreciated your invitation.
Thank you very much, Professor Bhandari, sir. You started with the relationship between education and health, and you pointed out how malnutrition can affect the right to education. And whenever we discuss this midday meal with respect to rights, so the question arises whether midday meal is the fulfillment of a right to food or right to education. That is a dilemma. But when you told us that a girl goes to Sarkari school to have some benefits from there, that is right to health, and then she goes to private school, that is right to education. You talked about Swachh Bharat also, and that is very important that if we take it in full stride, then Swachh Bharat can do wonders with rural India, not only rural India, but urban India also. You pointed out about the poor quality of care. We do not give attention to this particular aspect because we are more concerned with the curative aspect of medicine system. And that's why you pointed out the holistic medicine system where mind, body, and soul can be taken together. That was the gist of your presentation. And there were many other points also, which I cannot elaborate now, because it is time to request Professor Arvind Mohan, who is the professor in the Department of Economics in the University of Lucknow. I request him to give his presentation. Professor Arvind Mohan.
Thank you, Professor Bhatnagar. I'm extremely thankful to Lucknow Management Association and particularly Mr. Mathur for giving me this opportunity to be on this panel with such illustrious and eminent panelists. I'll be speaking at more macro level. I'm an economist and will want to speak like that only. I think the presentation made by Professor Bhandari was extremely interesting and extremely relevant. I'll love to start from there. Just please allow me to load my presentation. Yeah, hope this is visible to everybody. Is this visible?
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Please carry on.
Now, I'll start with the story of hollow boxes. And the story is that in the 70s, India was growing at a rate of around 3.5%. In 80s, we were growing at a rate of 5%, which was actually an aspiration for us, for the nation in the 50s. We were wanting to grow at 5%. In 90s, we grew at around 6.7%. And the first decade of this century, our growth rate has been close to around 7.2%. Phenomena. Almost unparalleled. If you're looking at large economies of the world, I think outside China, we are an exception which has never been challenged. Extraordinary. But truly speaking, this has been a story of hollow boxes. Why? Because in the 70s, when we were growing at 3.5%, 1% growth meant around 0.4% growth in employment. In the first decade of this century, when we were growing at 7.2% per annum, 1% growth meant a growth of only 0.01% in employment, which means story of jobless growth. Is exactly what the case that Professor Bhandari was quoting, that the lady said, this is your GDP. Exactly, it is your GDP. This is not a growth story for everybody. And that is where we need to look at what the first Human Development Report of UN had to say. The real wealth of a nation is its people, and the purpose of development is to create an enabling environment for people to enjoy long, healthy, and creative lives. And that is exactly what we are not doing. And that is what we need to do. And one very interesting example comes from Uttar Pradesh itself. I was part of a major World Bank study which was covering a period starting 1995 to 2005. What we find is UP's growth rate is almost 2% less than the nation's growth rate, almost 2%. But when you are looking at employment generation, UP was generating almost as much employment per percent of growth, rather in totality, which means per person, UP was generating more employment than rest of the country. And that's extremely interesting. That study of a 10-year period actually makes forces us to think differently. Is there a need for a paradigm shift? And that takes me to another very interesting thing. Government of Uttar Pradesh for some time has been talking about $1 trillion economy. And the first thing that came to my mind was that where from this $1 trillion economy will happen? And we need to understand that the period that we are looking at is starting around 2020 to 2025, meaning 5-year period. In 2020, UP's GDP in dollar terms was only 0.242 billion, and making it 4 trillion, making a trillion in around 5 year means taking 4 times jump, 400% growth over a period of this entire period. Now, when you start looking at it, how can it happen? And the answer is where from this growth comes. From 1950 onwards, whether you're looking at India or whether you're looking at Uttar Pradesh, much of growth has been actually fueled by investment. And the highest investment is observed in these two very interesting years. This graph presents India at 2 points of time, and the story for Uttar Pradesh is very similar. One is 2000, the start of the century. Another one is 2008. In 2000, India was a phenomenon. Look at the top of this graph on the left side. Our investment was 24%. We were already a phenomenon in 2000, 2001. In 2007-8, we have actually bettered this phenomena. Investment that India was able to make was around 37%. And the interesting truth is where from this investment came.
Please change the slide.
No, sir, no, your slide is not moving.
Your
Arvind Mohan, your slide is not moving.
Is
the
not
same.
moving.
Yes, now it has come. Now it has come.
Okay.
It has come. It has.
So look at the first bar. First bar is 2000, 2001. And the investment that India is making, whatever GDP is being generated, 24% is being plowed back to the economy. There is 24% investment. Almost a quarter of the GDP was getting invested. Phenomena unparalleled. And by 2008, this is, I'm purposely taking this 2008. This is the time when the world went into global meltdown. Also, in 2008, one very interesting thing happens. India has bettered that phenomena. Our investment is 37%. And of this 37%, where from this is getting financed? 35.5% is being financed by India's own domestic savings. Only 1.5% is the contribution of foreign investment, which means India's growth stories in 2008 is primarily self-driven, financed by India's own investment, India's own savings. Now, this is a very interesting story. 2008 is the highest investment that India attracted. Today, our investment has gone down to around 30%. And 30%, if we consider more or less UP's story is similar or slightly lower than that. With 30% investment and a capital output ratio of around 4.5, all the maximum growth which we can attain is around 7.5% per annum. And if $1 trillion economy is to happen in 5-year time period, growth which is needed annually is 32% per annum. On the face of it, it looks is just impossible. Probably we are very ambitious, but I started looking at it. Is it doable? I hope this is not becoming very small. Let's see if it works. Can you see this?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah. So to begin with, the current or average growth rate for almost more than a decade, more than 15 years, is only 6 to 7% growth for Uttar Pradesh. And even if we look at further optimization of this growth story. It can be enhanced with the kind of further investment and savings which we can attract. It can be raised to around maximum of 10%. Asset monetization. Uttar Pradesh, for example, has around 23 textile mills, which are all redundant, which are as good as non-functional, but they have lots of asset, land in particular, and all of it now in urban areas. And similarly, there are many other public sector entities where lots of assets are there. So asset monetization is a major area through which close to around 2 to 3% growth is fairly possible. Skill development is another area which I think some of the panelists have already mentioned. India's challenge is that if you are looking at the possible growth story, one key thing which we need to look at is investment cannot be raised beyond a level, as I already mentioned. Total factor productivity is what we haven't looked at. In Uttar Pradesh's total factor productivity today is less than 1% and can be raised without much difficulty to somewhere between 3 to 4. This will be a huge addition to the growth story, which we haven't tried to do as of now. And then when you are looking at skill development, look at the demographic profile of Uttar Pradesh. When we are looking at female participation, it's only around 19% of the female population. The workforce is only 19% of that. Female literacy, skill development amongst female, by itself, India is considered to be young population, and that has been one of the major reasons why we could generate such high savings, because of what we often refer to as demographic dividend, which means our working population is more than the dependent population, and that generates much of savings for India, and that has fueled growth so far, which is around 6 to 7% so far. If this has to be enhanced further, two major instruments are there. One is skill development across, which is very poor, and the kind of skill development mission that we are running today. The problem is that you are not using the existing platforms of schools, colleges, universities. We have created separate platform. We are not able to reach out to those people who actually need variety of skills. I think that convergence is critical. That is one. And two, look at those underprivileged groups, particularly female population. This automatically means that growth will become inclusive, because if you are able to bring larger sections of women population, their contribution is all fresh contribution that will add to your growth story. Around 3% addition is easily possible in UP's growth story. And then there are a few very interesting areas. One of them is health. Why health? Cost of hospitalization for the poorest 2 quintiles was estimated to be over 60% of actual mean household expenses, which means that when people fall sick on an average, whatever
please
their annual income
move the slide, please.
Is better?
Please keep on moving the slides also, sir.
I've been moving. God knows why it is not moving.
Now it is there.
When I enlarge it, it doesn't move. So I'll keep it this way only.
Technology.
So, 60% of the average poor household's income goes into hospitalization, and this is one of the biggest cause of poverty generation in India and Uttar Pradesh. Even for the rich families, when they fall sick, average of more than annual income, their entire annual income goes there. To pay for medical care, the poor are likely to depend on loans and sale of assets. Government, as far as our facilities are concerned, we have a large network of public services. Again, when, we were doing a study for one of the international organizations, and what we found, I'll come to that story later. So government is charging for, maybe for, as they claim, government is charging nothing and is challenging for resources. People end up either paying their lifetime savings or purchasing debt for their lifetime. That's a true story. And one of the major reasons is, I'll refer to Prime Minister's Advisory Committee led by Kumar Mangalam Birla and Ratan Tata. This committee mentioned that when you're looking at the primary health centers in India all across, the utilization rate is only 10%. When you are looking at district hospitals, they're overburdened. Now, you have to find some kind of a gatekeeping interventions have to happen so that people, one, The facilities there are acceptable and people go to those facilities. One of the critical things which we found in this, one of the World Bank study which I was leading, is that the kind of work schedule that we have handed over to the people, particularly doctors and ANMs, etc. 7 days a week, at least 7 days a week, they are required to be moving in the villages, doing some inspection. And if the primary health center doctor is found sitting in the facility, his senior is going to scold him that next time if I find, and this I'm quoting from a real example. In one of the cases, the doctor mentioned that the deputy CMO told him that if you are found here again, you will be suspended. This is not your job. So we are investing in static facilities, that is primary health centers, sub-centers, etc. Much of our investment is traveling there, and our services, the work that we are doing is moving in completely in different direction. These two have to converge. There is a kind of a drift which is happening. Again, when we are looking at bringing down mortality rate, etc., public health facility interventions through melas, etc., they've all done wonders. Much of mortality could be brought down largely because of government intervention. But when you are looking at an ordinary man or a woman fall sick, only 9% of them go to public health facility because they know the doctor, etc., will not be there. So we are making investment, but it is not becoming functional. This needs to change. Not only that, issue is not of resources. We have money. If I'm looking at a decade-long story, annual expenditure which the government is making is close to around 13 to 15,000 crore. This includes investments which are coming from World Bank, USAID, etc., all inclusive, close to around say 15,000 crore average. Almost more than 1 lakh crore is actually being spent by the ordinary people. Close to 1 lakh crore per annum is being spent by the ordinary people as out-of-pocket expenses. These out-of-pocket expenses, the last study that we did, close to around 58% of that is traveling to the quacks, etc. Now, this is what we are not able to handle. The result is that the ordinary person, he spends through his nose, gets inappropriate care. When the case is spoiled, then he runs to some public facility or the private facility. By the time it's too late, it becomes too expensive and results are also extremely poor. We have not been focusing on this part of expenditure. We have always been looking at only the government expenditure part. This out-of-pocket expense is critical. If we are able to institutionalize this, there will be two great advantages. Healthcare, the kind of resources which will come in on an annual basis will be phenomenal, much beyond what we have ever thought of. Two, this becomes institutionalized. People will get much more appropriate care by institutionalizing this. Three, this is eating into our savings. This 1 lakh crore is coming out of people's saving. It would have been there with the people, would have got converted into investment, which is not getting converted into investment. Agriculture, low-hanging fruits. Annually, India loses more than 2 lakh crore worth of agri-produce. Uttar Pradesh loses close to around 50 to 60,000 out of that. 50 to 60,000 crore rupees worth of agri-produce will use. Why? Because we don't have logistics lines, we don't have warehouses, we don't have cold chains. An older report of Government of India, I think is 2007 report. At that point of time, it was estimated that close to 73 or 74,000 crore investment was needed. Through that, it could have been plugged all across India, which meant that annually we would have been saving close to around 2 lakh crore worth of agri-produce, which is going wasted. Now, the challenge is that this 2 lakh crore, or if you are looking at Uttar Pradesh, close to around 50 to 60,000 crore rupees, if it is saved, it is an immediate injection into our GDP, which means around 2% growth. It is immediate injection into our this is the finest anti-poverty program, because much of the resources that we are losing, these resources are resources of the poorest of the poor, because it is his produce which he is not able to, his staying capacity is very low. It is that which goes, much of it goes rotten. So it is the best anti-poverty program, and this is the finest anti-inflationary measure. Reserve Bank of India report since 2010 suggests that almost 1/3 of inflationary pressure in India is because of primary products, agriculture-led inflation. If this could be saved in UP and in India, this could be a huge addition to the farmers' income, particularly to the poorest, and will be the finest anti-inflationary measure that we can think of. Irrigation, again, if you are looking at irrigation in Uttar Pradesh, we are claiming that somewhere between 80 to 90% of our agricultural holdings are irrigated. But the truth is, over a period of time, they've all got silted. More than 40% of our irrigated facilities are now silted, which means that this irrigation is wasted. You have lots of labor under Manrega. Use that labor to unsilt this agricultural land. Reclaim this irrigation capacity. This can easily add 2 to 3% to the growth story in Uttar Pradesh annually. Non-farm sector is another major area. Much of employment which is getting generated in the rural area is now getting generated in non-agrarian sector. Second generation reform is truly what this country needs. I will go back to the 90s when Manmohan Singh brought those reforms. At that point of time, when you look at the parliamentary debates, what you find is that he mentions in the parliament that we can only do limited things given our resources. So we are initiating first generation reform. Sooner rather than later, we will bring in the second generation reform, which will also bring in the human face. In my understanding, second generation reforms is about two things. One is human development, that is health and education. And two is rural development, which is agriculture and non-agricultural sector, including small scale and cottage industries in the rural areas. This is what we haven't truly unleashed till date. This is what needs to be done. And look at its importance. I'll recall when President Obama was visiting, this is again Manmohan Singh as Prime Minister, he was Prime Minister and Obama was visiting India. This is immediately after the great meltdown, global meltdown. And as it is customary in US, when the American president is visiting, going out for some major visit, he interacts with his media. Obama was also interacting. Somebody asked that, why are you going to India? He said that I'm going to India to seek market access. And what is that market access? It is India's rural economy. And the truth is, if you're looking at the global meltdown, the Western economy couldn't have come out of that crisis without availability of India's and China's market. And that is what Obama was coming to for as far as India is concerned. That is the kind of relevance that India's rural economy and the human development sector has. India is is kind of a 3-engine aircraft. We have opened the first engine, that is industry. Remaining 2 engines have as much energy as the first engine had. Open these 2 remaining engines, we can do wonders. Even if the world sinks, India is assured of a double-digit growth for at least another 20 years at the minimum. Another very important area is age of knowledge. Again, one of the prime ministers said that 21st century is age of knowledge. And I will add to it that assessment of most of the international organizations is that 21st century, there are 4 major engines which will drive this century. One of them is agriculture. Another one is food processing. Yet another one is textiles. And the 4th one is knowledge. And Uttar Pradesh is truly blessed with all of them. It is UP's, it is truly our, as an idea, Uttar Pradesh should be an idea whose time has come, but we'll have to unleash it. As far as age of knowledge is concerned, much of knowledge is created in universities, and the kind of investment which is going into to education, particularly higher education, and also health, is extremely dismal. I think we have to revisit, because now the story is that if Uttar Pradesh has to grow, and if India has to grow to its potential, its only possibility is inclusive growth. You can't ignore health, you can't ignore education, and you can't ignore rural development. Without this, there can't be any further growth. If you're looking at growth rates of anything but say 15%, I think easily in Uttar Pradesh, 20% plus growth is possible, at least for another 5 to 10 years. At least think about double-digit growth, but it is only possible if you unleash the remaining 2 engines of India's aircraft. That is the growth story. Inclusive growth is the only option for India's growth, for UP's growth. And without unleashing these remaining engines, nothing can be done. Please think about a paradigm shift, unleash these two remaining engines, and ensure maybe more than double-digit growth for at least 20 years in Uttar Pradesh and India. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Professor Arvind Mohan. Inclusive growth is the only option for India or for UP. Apart from education and health, you focused on agriculture. And you brought this point to home that in non-farm sector, the income has grown from, that is the proportion has grown from 40% to 60%. And rural non-farm wage is higher than the farm is. Then you pointed at about knowledge. Yes, this is the age of knowledge economy, and we are knowledge-based society. And we must tap this also for inclusive economic growth. Now this is time for question and answer session. So the questions are invited, and it would be better if it is also pointed out that who is to reply, that is to whom it is addressed. Thank you. Mr. A.K. Mathur, sir, you can take it up now.
Any questions? You can unmute yourself and ask the question. Anyone? I think there are no questions. So thank you very much, Professor Bhatnagar, for so ably conducting the session. And thank you, Dr. Rukmani Banerjee, Professor Alok Rai, Dr. Bhandari, and Dr. Arvind Mohan for your valuable inputs. I'm especially thankful to Dr. Bhandari, who
joining from US
at an unearthly hour in the US. What time is it, sir, there?
It's not too bad. It is 7:52.
Now it is 7:50.
I came late from Miami yesterday night, and this was on my head, so I really was groggy. And anyway, it worked out well. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much for joining. It's always a pleasure to hear you. So we come to end of today's proceedings. We'll resume tomorrow for session 3 and 4. Please log in at 2:15 for these very invigorating session. And we look forward to another set of panelists tomorrow, session 3 and 4. And goodbye for now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you very
Take care
much
and
for
stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Namaskar, Rukmani ji. Namaskar.